Welcome, I'm Lee Cowan, and this is Here Comes the Sun. It's a closer look at the people, places, and things we bring you every Sunday morning, like Mo Rocca's sit-down with actress Christine Baranski. You know her from The Good Wife and many other performances, but her career actually goes back decades.
Who was the first person you told that you got into Juilliard?
The first person I told was my mother. I still remember meeting my mother and telling her the news, and we went to the Algonquin Hotel and had Southern Comfort Manhattans with cherries. We each had 2 Manhattans, and it was the only time I got drunk with my mother.
We'll have much more from their conversation a little later on in the show.
The decision to do the sitcom, to do Sybil, that was a big decision, yeah.
I read the script, and it was written by this television guy named Chuck Lorre. Now, one of the most successful men in television, but at the time, I didn't know that Chuck Lorre. I just read the script, and I read her lines, this character Marianne, and I thought, well, I kind of know what to do with that. I know how to put a top spin on those one-liners and send it across the net. So, you know what I mean?
The homes that make it into Architectural Digest aren't really the homes the way most of us know a home to be. They're big, they're perfect, they're seemingly out of reach. But the magazine does offer us a satisfying glimpse of that life. Our Serena Williams takes us to an open house 100 years in the making.
What is it about human nature that makes us so curious about each other's homes?
Yeah.
Is it fantasy?
Yes.
Is it, voyeurism?
You want to see how other people live.
As a designer, being on the cover of AD is an honor, of course. It's like being a musician and being on the cover of Rolling Stone.
And the featured piece here is this red velvet chair that belonged to Andy Warhol.
We'll be right back. Christine Baranski has a habit of playing regal, accomplished women. But as she told our Mo Rocca, she really is just a girl from the Midwest. And those roots still run pretty deep.
Christine Baranski has specialized in playing a certain class of character. Sophisticated.
Darling, I know. It's awful when a loved one is shopping impaired.
Very smart.
People I thought were saints, they weren't. That's why you don't go on instinct.
Sage.
My mother, your grandmother, was a Livingston of Livingston Manor, and they came to this city in 1674. You belong to old New York, my dear, and don't let anyone tell you different.
Why do you think so often you've been cast as intellectual, sophisticated, high-status characters?
Because I'm sophisticated and intellectual.
There you go. Good.
No. I don't know, it makes me laugh because when people really look up, Buffalo and the Buffalo Bills and where I come from.
Yes, Baranski is a proud Buffalonian, the daughter of Virginia and Lucian Baranski, who grew up steeped in her family's Polish culture.
My first memory of going to see live performers was when my father took me to see a Polish singing and dancing troupe, and they were named Śląsk. I must have been 7. And at the curtain call, I suddenly heard my father shouting, "Bravo!" And he actually was crying and shouting. It's my fondest memory of my father. And I think it may have been the beginning of my feeling for, wow, the performing arts, performers, that's a really special thing to be a performer.
When Christine was 8 years old, her father died abruptly from an aortic aneurysm. She found comfort on Friday night visits to her grandparents' home.
And while they were playing bingo, I was upstairs in my grandmother's bedroom playing every single role in South Pacific. I can do any role and any song. Sometimes my grandfather would come upstairs and say, "The chandelier is shaking. Can you, stop?"
Because you were putting on a Broadway show and you were just one person.
No, not one person. There was a statue of the Virgin Mary because my grandmother was very religious. So I kind of played to the Virgin Mary.
Right, and that's a very forgiving audience. Life centered around family and faith.
I went to Catholic school for 12 years, 8 years of grammar school, and then 4 years to an all-girls Catholic high school.
What did going to an all-girls school do for you?
I look back on it and I think it was great that I did it. I was actually president of my class for 4 years in a row. I did things that I might have been shy doing it if I was in a school with guys. And then, of course, once I started doing plays, I was the lead in these plays. And then my senior class play was Mame.
Yes.
You can imagine.
And you played?
I played Mame.
And in 1970, Baranski applied to New York City's prestigious Juilliard School to study drama. I'm curious, what did the teenage pre-Juilliard Christine Baranski sound like?
I sounded kind of like a girl from the Midwest. This is the way I sounded when I entered Juilliard. I had hard R's, which they said I had to get rid of my hard R's. I had a sibilant S, which is why they waitlisted me, because, see these teeth? I had a space between my teeth.
Like Lauren Hutton?
Yeah, I had a Lauren Hutton gap.
Yeah.
But I didn't look as beautiful as Lauren Hutton, but I had this gap.
To get rid of her sibilant S, and trust me, it's not that easy, Baranski capped her teeth and worked with a speech therapist before re-auditioning. Who was the first person you told that you got into Juilliard?
The first person I told was my mother. I still remember meeting my mother and telling her the news, and we went to the Algonquin Hotel and had Southern Comfort Manhattans with cherries. We each had 2 Manhattans, and it was the only time I got drunk with my mother. But it was really an extraordinary moment, and I was so happy that she shared in that moment.
What a moment for her. I mean, she'd been widowed for 10 years.
It still makes me so emotional.
Before she even graduated, Baranski was getting cast in theater and earning rave reviews. But her hopes and dreams weren't confined to the stage. I just wanted to read back to you a quote of yours. I was in my early 30s, and I remember actually praying that I would meet a man because I was ready to have children.
I remember coming back home. I was visiting my mother and Nana, and I remember going to my high school, and there was a grotto with the statue of the Virgin Mary. And I remember saying a prayer. My prayer was that I would meet someone with whom to have children and get married.
Within a day, she got a call about an off-Broadway role opposite actor Matthew Coles, known for playing pimp Billy Clyde Tuggle on the soap opera All My Children.
Billy Clyde Tuggle, you did it again. Yes, sir. I mean, what am I doing here messing around waiting for Mr. Chandler when I can use his wife as a shield?
One night he asked me if I wanted to ride home on his motorcycle, and I'm not even comfortable in cars, but he was such an exotic character. He was unlike anybody I'd ever met, with the shaggy blonde hair and the unfiltered Mexican cigarette and the odd way he had of talking. And anyway, I got on the back of that bike.
Were you scared?
Yes, I was scared. And I remember saying to him, Matthew, I'm scared. And he said, so am I.
That motorcycle, named Lucifer, was in attendance when the two wed in 1983.
And he drove me away from the little church where we got married, and I was side saddle on Lucifer in my long wedding gown. And there was a little bit of motorcycle, there was a black stain, so I never had the gown clean because I wanted to keep that black stain.
Of course you didn't have that cleaned.
No, I still have the dress, yeah.
The next year, 1984, was a very good year for Baranski. She was expecting her first of 2 daughters with Coles and won her first of 2 Tony Awards.
That whole year was just, oh, who has a year like that? It was James Lapine, it was Mike Nichols, it was Tom Stoppard, it was Stephen Sondheim. What an embarrassment of riches, huh?
George Orwell had it wrong. 1984 was a great year. I mean, everything great happened.
That's very funny. We do not move in the same circles.
Mama, you are incorrigible.
I take that as the highest praise.
And almost 40 years later, the great parts haven't stopped coming.
Money isn't everything, Agnes.
Baranski will next appear as Agnes Van Ryn in The Gilded Age, created by Julian Fellows of Downton Abbey fame.
I was so happy to get that role. I thought, corsets, wigs, dialect, coaching sessions. And the role, of course, she's quite regal. So, you know, there's nothing like playing a snob as written by Julian Fellows. What could be better at this point?
You're bigger than you've ever been.
Did you say bigger?
Yeah, not physically, like bigger as in.
Well, let me put it, I don't know if I'm bigger, but I'm busier.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. I want to give hope. I didn't get to be a leading lady in a musical until I was in my 50s. And then in my mid-50s, I was offered The Good Wife, and now, to my amazement, I'm on The Good Fight and The Gilded Age. And I'm about to turn 70.
She's also a grandmother of 3 boys, the first born shortly before the death of Matthew Coles in 2014. It continues to be a rich life for Christine Baranski on and off the stage.
There's a lot to be said for just being clear about what you want, perhaps. Not that I have any formula. I don't want to preach and say I know how to do it. I don't. But I did have a lot of answered prayers in my life.
Stick around for more exclusive excerpts from that conversation that you can only see right here on Here Comes the Sun.
Hi, AD. Come on in.
Up next, Architectural Digest Renaissance among a new generation of celebrities.
I love my tailor.
But the craziest stuff happens in my karaoke room.
What does Fred Astaire's living room, Serena Williams' karaoke bar, and Maria Sharapova's bowling alley all have in common? Serena Ulchul is about to show us.
Hi, AD. Come on in.
Okay, admit it. Most people like to take a peek at how the rich and famous live.
I love my tailor.
Right?
But the craziest stuff happens in my karaoke room.
It's an escape. And these days, a needed guilty pleasure.
One of our elements of high design are these signs everywhere.
After being stuck inside our own homes for the past 2 years.
Hello, AD.
Well, we're in luck.
Welcome to my home.
Month after month, bold-faced names like tennis star Maria Sharapova open their doors for Architectural Digest.
Your bowling alley really stood out.
I think that stands out for me too.
Are you a
not
bowler?
That I'm a bowler or anything.
Bowling alley aside, Sharapova's home is a place she finds refuge after jetting around the world.
It's a safe place to come home to. It's sheepskin.
A place she felt safe letting AD inside for a glimpse.
I think from an outside perspective, people only see what you get them, right? But there's also a human element to every athlete, and this was a really incredible opportunity to show that to the world.
My life centers around playing, so I always want to be able to pick up an instrument and play.
Interior design-obsessed rocker Lenny Kravitz agrees.
As a designer, being on the cover of AD is an honor, of course. It's like being a musician and being on the cover of Rolling Stone.
And the featured piece here is this red velvet chair that belonged to Andy Warhol.
This month's cover features the annual AD 100 list, the very best designers in the business. For a century now, Architectural Digest has been taking note of how and where we live.
Should I sign it to both of you?
Just before the pandemic, the magazine celebrated 100 years with a book of its favorite homes and a stylish party.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight.
Vogue Global Editorial Director Anna Winter helps oversee AD for parent company Condé Nast.
To be in an Architectural Digest meant that you'd achieved great heights and that it was the final stamp of recognition.
In 2016, Winter's protege, Amy Astley,
Thank you, Anna.
was hired to boost the brand.
I think she brought it a new perspective, a younger perspective, and she brought it charm and personality and intelligence, and it was a little bit less maybe rigid than it had been before.
I wanted it to be buzzy, current, relevant, people to talk about it, which now people will say to me, I saw Maria Sharapova on the cover, I saw Lenny Kravitz on the cover, I saw...
Astley's first cover as editor-in-chief was fashion designer Marc Jacobs.
Lots of people had asked him in New York and he had said no. So he was waiting for the right moment, and Architectural Digest was the right moment for Marc Jacobs.
Now even the most private A-list stars seem to pull back the curtain.
What is it about human nature that makes us so curious about each other's homes?
Yeah.
Is it fantasy?
Yes.
Is it, voyeurism?
You want to see how other people live. Yeah. It's an enduring interest to see beautiful homes, how other people live, what that could look like. Maybe it's inspiring, or maybe you're like, oof, I hate that. And I think that's also just a sense of hope for people.
Right.
Someday, I'm going to have the house I really want. You know,
Look
but
at
you
that.
get a sense of the chairs. That's a very
tulips
classic chair that we still see. But it is a snapshot of that time.
And boy, has the way we live changed since the Architectural Digest was founded in California in 1920.
I mean, the old ways people lived, very formal, very stiff, it's completely different now. You know, like you wouldn't have had an open kitchen in the old days.
No one would want to live near the refrigerator and the stove. Bathrooms.
Right. You wouldn't show that back in the day, and now it's a trophy room, you know.
Led for decades by the late editor Paige Rents, AD has both recorded and set design styles.
It's really wild to see the different trends in decorating. Or here's the glamorous, nighttime shoot in the dark. Now we mainly shoot in daylight because, tastes change and times change.
And those times are captured in a time capsule.
Where are we headed?
We're headed to cold storage, Serena.
Okay, what's in here?
Delicate materials.
We got a rare look inside the Condé Nast archive.
This is the vault, cold storage. Oh my gosh.
It's 40 degrees
Whoa.
in here.
It's an ice locker.
We're in the cold storage. It's like a converted meat locker.
Right.
It's like walking back in time.
It really is. And no one gets to come in here.
No, I don't. This is special for you.
AD's original files and images, like Fred Astaire's living room, are stored in perfect order, naturally, next to other legendary titles like Vogue and The New Yorker.
And how fun is this, Vanity Fair? This is why we're not allowed here, because I am snooping around where I am not meant to be.
I have a feeling that your home pretty much looks this together most of the time.
100% it does.
And there's a pretty good reason why. Interior designers Nate Berkus and Jeremiah Brent and their 2 kids are familiar faces in Architectural Digest, along with their homes.
My mom was an interior designer, so we had a subscription to AD growing up, and it was always on the coffee table until it got too high, and then my mom would move the old issues somewhere else. But it was the magazine you didn't throw away, because it really was a documentation of the history of design.
Even for star designers, it's still a thrill to say yes to AD.
You have to be pretty much willing to swing the doors open as wide as possible to say, this is our life, please welcome. We would love to have this record of this time in our lives and this time in particular in our kids' lives. It's such an emotional component to it. It's really special.
And that's always been AD's secret, eliciting an emotion, a special feeling of home.
Architectural Digest has lasted 100 years because of the quality of the mission, that we're showing you the best.
As promised, more with the boundless Christine Baranski right after the break. Welcome back. Mo Rocca and Christine Baranski continue their conversation now, including her brief stint waiting tables and an acceptance at New York's famed Juilliard school that almost never was.
I called the school because I hadn't gotten any letter from them, and they said I was waitlisted because they feared that because I had this, I didn't have a whistling S, but it was a thick S, that it was the hardest sound to correct. And if I was willing to perhaps cap my teeth to prevent the whistling or the thick S, and to have speech therapy. So I re-auditioned for the school. And so, Yeah, I entered the school with a nasal voice and a whistling S and a tight jaw and shoulders that went up. And I had a pelvic thrust and I had fallen arches. And mainly they told me I needed to relax. I had 4 years of teachers telling me to relax.
No, is a pelvic thrust like doing the Charleston sort
It's
of?
like you stand with your, it's bad posture, basically. It's like you're
Flapper girls had it. Yeah.
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 Oh, okay.
So I just needed a lot of work.
A fixer-upper.
But yes, I was a fixer-upper. So yeah, by the time I graduated from Juilliard, my voice it's even lower than it is now, because after all those voice and speech exercises for 4 years, I mean, I sounded, my God, it was lower than this.
And I started like this.
By the way, is a sibilant S the same as the lisp?
Yes, it was a thick S.
Yeah.
Speech therapists would put little rubber bands on my tongue and told me to keep the rubber band on the roof of my mouth to retrain my tongue. Good luck with that. You're not going to retrain your tongue at 19. I think I managed with the S, and I think I've managed to correct a lot of things, but I'm still working on relaxing.
Yeah. You just started working right away.
I know, I didn't even get I didn't collect my diploma. I didn't attend the graduation ceremony because my acting teacher, Michael Kahn, thank you, Michael, hired me to be a lady in waiting at the American Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut. So I was already working and missed my graduation. And after that, I did a Jacobean play for Michael Kahn, a play that I had already done at Juilliard, a play called 'Tis Pity She's a Whore. My first leading role was the play 'Tis Pity She's a Whore, about 2 young people, brother-sister, incestuous love affair. And it's a really dark play. By the end, she gets disemboweled by her brother, and he brings her heart out on a dagger and says, if here's Annabella's heart. That's hardly the, lovely ingenue role.
It's a prop heart. Did you ever have a survival job? Did you ever wait tables?
Yes, I did. Oh. In fact, but it was a wonderful job. I was a cocktail waitress at on and off. When I wasn't working, I'd go back. It was a restaurant called Rappaport's, and it was right next to the theater where Chicago was playing. Chicago with Gwen Verdon, and Cheetah Rivera, and Jerry Orbach. And they sometimes came to the restaurant after the show, and I would wait on them. So it was kind of amazing years later when I was actually in the movie of Chicago.
The decision to do the sitcom, to do Sybil, that was a big decision, yeah.
I'd been approached about doing television ever since I started, the Broadway career began in my 30s. Although I dreamed of being a stage actress, it didn't occur to me ever to go to Juilliard so I could have a Hollywood career. And people in television were wanting me to audition, and I always thought, well, I don't want to raise my kids in LA. We didn't want to move to LA. So it was always like, if there was a show that shot in New York, I'd be willing to do television. But there weren't sitcoms shooting in New York. So I kind of went kicking and screaming into television, but there was this one sitcom, and I read the script, and it was written by this television guy named Chuck Lorre. Now, one of the most successful men in television, but at the time, I didn't know that Chuck Lorre. I just read the script, and I read her lines, this character Marianne, and I thought, well, I kind of know what to do with that. I know how to put a top spin on those one-liners and send it across the net. So, you know what I mean? And they really wanted me to do it, and honestly, the night before I flew to LA, I think I was still up in the middle of the night wanting to call my agent and say, I don't think I can do this, as it's going to be too hard on my family. But I did it. And it did change my career. Suddenly, millions of people were seeing actually what I had been doing for years on the stage.
I'm Lee Cowan. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Here Comes the Sun.